In this episode, we were talking with Scott Bennett, who is an author, an independent whistleblower, is a former US Army Special Operations Psychological Warfare Officer, Civil Affairs Psychological Operations Command and State Department Counter-Terrorist Analyst. He delves into Russian complex interactions with the West amid ongoing conflicts, which we talk about. So a lot of the things that we discussed on this episode was about the Polish MEP Rips Ursula von der Leyen apart, the West trying to take Russia apart for years. Putin is the most intelligent strategist today. The 9/11 lies from the government. The bullet mentioned was different to what was fired in Trump's attempted assassination. And a woman, it looks like a spy, and people charting through social. Was it actors for the Secret Service? Who Trump should have protecting him? Trump is in favor of Israel. Why is that? People are leaving the areas that have been infiltrated, and foreigners living in Russia love it. And then are the asylum seekers from prisons and asylums, and finally stirring a guerrilla army. So you don't want to miss this week's episode. You'll find everything on awakeningpodcast.org.
Welcome, everybody. Welcome to Quantum Nurse Freedom International Livestream. And with me is my good friend from Poland, Roy Kolan, who has his Awakening podcast and many other podcasts. And of course, we are very grateful to have Scott Bennett today. And, for a lot of people who are critical thinkers, you would know who Lieutenant Scott Bennett is, and he's a PhD and an author and an independent whistleblower, global news commentator, and he's a former U.S. Army Special Operations Psychological Warfare officer. He's on the 11th Battalion, and he is also a Civil Affairs Psychological Operations Command and State Department counter-terrorism analyst. And Scott Bennett delves into Russia's complex interactions with the West amidst ongoing conflicts. And so I was really happy to have Scott Bennett, and it was my surprise that, yes, he said we could come, even so for a short time, but he's going to lead us anyway. Okay. And so just for the overall title, I thought, let me just put here the Analyzing Putin, the Checkmate Move in Global Revolution, because he's one guy, he's an honorable person for me who does his independent journalism and critical analysis by really going to different places to this where the conflicts is happening. But Scott and I know that even if he doesn't go far, even in our own country, the United States of America, there's a lot of conflict going in. So Scott, welcome. And that was just a little introduction for our audience because it is your first time with us, but feel free to say more. And what I really wanted to hear from you is, and let you lead us to this conversation, whether you want to start from macro, that's outside United States, at the gates of United States, and go in, or micro or out. Because all I know is that it's so annoying when every time you hear people having a conversation, they either have a Russophobic moment or a Chinaphobic moment, and they never see what's happening inside. And just like you being healthy, gotta look inside first. So go ahead and tell more about the people and where they could follow you. And I made sure that I posted your wix site, the armypsyop.wixsite.com, and do help and support him with his work, the patreon.com. So all this will be in the video.
Well, Grace, it's wonderful to be with you, and I'm very honored. I love intellectual discussions with very smart, reasonable people. And let me just say to your co-host guest, who's from Poland, I was delighted to see one of the Polish MP ministers, a lady, ascend the European Commission platform and berate and attack Ursula von Leyen like I've never seen before. This woman said, wonderful things that, created cheering applause. And one of the things that she said was, Ursula von Leyen, you are responsible for every rape and every torment that occurs in Europe, and the women in Europe that are afraid to walk outside in their cities because of your immigration policies in Europe, and went on to a lot of other things. I thought it was an absolutely brilliant speech. And this Nazi, and I'll use these terms very, very bluntly because we need to be super direct at this point. I personally think Ursula von Leyen is a completely corrupt globalist that should hang from the neck and be executed like Mussolini, as I do many other of these fake leaders that have been put in there, I think, by the globalists and their entire agenda of wickedness, which I believe includes this religion of climate change, this religion of homosexual, LGBT, transgenderism, this religion of political correctness and tearing down statues mixed with an emotional fascism. I think this is a despicable, thuggish Frankenstein mentality that they have tried to implement in Europe and the United States to control people. I think that there really is the Hunger Games scenario. We're in a fiction, truth is stranger than fiction moment. So I just wanted to put that out to your Polish co-director here. When I saw that, I was so impressed. But to your earlier point, do we start inward or do we start outward? And I think we can do both at the same time because, I'm sure you've seen these models of galaxies or stars, that they explode outward and then they collapse inward, right? Like a black hole. And I think that's a very telling analogy for what we see happening both in the United States and the world. So if we go back to post 1945 and ascend through the 50s and the 60s and the 70s and the 80s, right? We saw America begin to expand in its role, its hegemony, and its full spectrum dominance, its militarism around the world, crushing Japan and Germany. America grew, but then it started to slow as it passed policies that I think opened it up to destruction. The destruction of the family, the destruction of marriage, the introduction of divorce, no-fault divorce, pornography, immigration, amnesty, and then, of course, in the 1990s, the collapse of the Soviet Union. We did a pivot point. Instead of what Ronald Reagan would have done and what I would have done and Scott Ritter would have done and McGregor would have done and the other American intellectuals, instead of going to Russia and embracing them like the prodigal son and the prodigal father and helping Russia transition out of its Bolshevik communist mentality and economy, which you could say was set in motion by the Talmudist, Zionist, American elements in the early part of the century, in the right after World War I. Lenin, of course, being a controlled agent of the West to take out the Tsar and things like that. But instead of the West embracing Russia and unifying its Christian Orthodox personalities and philosophies and really bringing it close, we began to try and cannibalize, rape, and dismember Russia. And I remember those years very vividly. And we had this delusion that we were now the kings of the world, and we could go around the world and claim tribute, steal their resources in exchange for paper money, and take Russia apart one oligarch at a time. The timber, the coal, the natural resources. We would, give them fish, but not teach them how to fish. We would collapse their economy, and we did that under Strobe Talbot and Bill Clinton and Al Gore and Larry Summers and the CIA and Chechen wars and NATO invasions of Yugoslavia and the Serbia conflict. I mean, the 90s were rippling with assaults on the Slavic Russian countries, and then breaking Russia apart. The Baltic nations, Ukraine, Poland. We were aggressively sowing the seeds of aggression and animosity and blame and setting up this brainwashing of hatred towards Russia rather than healing and reconciliation. And that was our tragic mistake, because blessed are the peacemakers, for they shall be called the children of God. We weren't peacemakers. We were vampires. And it was masqueraded and covered up by nostalgia and divine pageantry and brainwashing. But then, Russia, basically, Vladimir Putin came in and saved the country. And I begin my book on Vladimir Putin, analyzing Putin, the checkmate move, from that position to really see how badly we had failed and made a wrong turn. And we never were wise enough or humble enough to backtrack out of that and reorient ourselves. We just continued to double down in this aggressive state against Russia. And we lied, and we put on all of these graces and airs through George Bush and these false notions of wanting to be friends with Russia, while we deconstruct the rest of the world. And of course, just to say quickly, Vladimir Putin, I think he's one of the most brilliant, intelligent strategists and leaders we have in the world today. I don't think anybody on the world stage compares to Vladimir Putin's experience in the intelligence community, in the diplomatic, political communities, and really keeping his boat together and purging it of the oligarchical CIA infiltration, and getting Russia reoriented towards a czarist attitude of being Russian. Not communist, but being Russian. So there's a whole new identity that Putin stood up for, and he's maintained conservative traditional family values. He's emphasized the importance of family and children, and I've seen that every time I've went to Russia, and I saw this in Iran too. Iran, I think, is a very wholesome, natural, traditional values country. Very mild people. They don't hate America. They don't want war with America. It's all a lie, I would say, by the Zionist elements, the Jewish Talmudist Zionist elements, that has been pushing a lot of this aggression. And I'm not anti-Semitic. I don't even assign that as a valid term. I think anybody who tries to throw that is a liar and a coward and a fool that doesn't want to have a discussion of the facts of the last 50 years or 100 years. But putting that aside, Vladimir Putin is saved his country, and his country is continuing to blossom and grow, largely because of the economic sanctions and militarism that we've tried to throw at Russia in the last 10 years specifically. But let's not forget too, the continuation of the American implosion, I think, began with the 9/11 attacks. And 9/11, if you've looked at Robert David Steele's work, and we've got our book on our website, 9/11 Truth, Robert David Steele, Jim Fetzer, Barbara Honegger, Kevin Barrett, myself, Susan Lindauer, on and on and on. There's so many people and experts and analysts and engineers and architects and scientists that have contributed to the body of work exposing that the 9/11 event was a false flag, self-engineered, self-inflicted terrorist strike. Airplanes did not crash into the buildings. That was a nuclear event in the core of the building. I don't know all the tiny details. I never admit to trying to know that, but I know enough of the broad strokes to know that the government explanation is scientifically and physically impossible. So the Twin Towers falling at free fall speed, being turned into dust, and the nuclear presence is very revealing. The Building 7 collapsing on its own free fall speed is very revealing. The Pentagon being struck most likely by a cruise missile, not a plane. And I drove by the Pentagon the next day. I have personal experience seeing nothing but a big tarp covering the hole, and the grass being completely unmarked. No plane wreckage, no massive divot in the ground as what would happen as if a tractor plowed through a golf course. Nothing like that. It was a pristine scene. But that was the great psychological operation that broke the back of the American Republic and oriented us towards empire. And it was a Jewish, Zionist, Talmudist empire, the Project for a New American Sanctuary, completely populated with Zionists, pushing America to be the military juggernaut that would take out 7 countries in 5 years, as Wesley Clark admitted. Iraq, Afghanistan, Libya, Syria, Iran, Saudi Arabia, they were all on the chessboard. But I think it failed spectacularly. And again, that is the implosion of the United States back into a civil war, I think, that is emerging. And then with the latest episode was Ukraine being overthrown in 2014 by Victoria Nuland, the Obama administration, Joe Biden, and they've done the same, tried to do the same thing to Venezuela, numerous other places. Look at Libya. And Ukraine has failed spectacularly, and it shows once again Vladimir Putin and Lavrov and Zakharova, all of the leadership of Russia, tried for years to impress upon the West that that was a red line, a bridge that they could not cross. Russia would not allow nuclear weapons to be that close to their border. And when the West flippantly and arrogantly dismissed everything that Russia said, Russia stepped in and acted. It went in and defended the Russian-speaking people in eastern Donbass, and waged war against the pro-Nazis that were, used as mercenaries by the West. And Russia now is at a point where it has completely defeated Ukraine. Now you see the evolution of this. Part 2 is they're sending Ukraine into Europe on cheerleading tours to recruit. But what they're actually doing, I predict, is planting agents and commissars and areas that will try and trigger a fermentation of their Nazi ideology, their thuggishness up into the European lands and peoples that are going to be economically broken in the next year because of, again, the U.S. destroying the Nord Stream pipeline, the deindustrialization of Germany. They've created the conditions, especially the mass migration from Africa and Asia that have flooded up into Europe. You've created an environment of a combustion, and I think it's very close to a major conflict. And as I just wrote a few minutes ago, we're going to witness the United States also subject to this great combustion in the assassinations that are now occurring. They've tried to assassinate Donald Trump. I've seen the bullet wound on his ear, and I'll tell you, Grace, it was not a 5.56 round. I was in the Army. A 5.56 round would have blown off his entire chunk of his ear. That's a big bullet. But there was a little hole from what I saw, and that matches the sound that I heard, which was a 22 Magnum rifle. A 22 Magnum rifle is a very small bullet, but it's the fastest bullet and the farthest shooting bullet that you could have for a sniper. It's a perfect weapon. So I predict there were 2 shooters. I predict that there was someone on the rooftop behind the patsy, and that it was actually a 22 caliber bullet that clipped his ear. And what we're going to see next too is probably an assassination of Kamala Harris, and then they move in Gavin Newsom to replace her as vice president while Joe Biden is still president, and then they will assassinate Biden, blaming a Trump supporter, and then he will be pushed up into the presidency before the election so that he can initiate draconian lockdown, civil war, martial law, executive orders, and it will only lead to a civil war in America. And I think it's hard for a lot of people to really understand this and believe this, and maybe even get angry at me for saying this. Like, how can you say this? But as a PSYOP guy, I look at all the possible paths, every possible scenario, every ugly, foul, evil thing that could happen, as well as every beautiful, good, noble thing that could happen. And I lay these out, and it's important to expect the unexpected and to be prepared. So we'll see if Donald Trump gets in. or if he's going to be taken out, if it's going to lead to the mass civil war in America, which I'm not afraid of, because I know conservative patriots like myself who've been in the military, especially the veterans. They're not about war. They're about law and order and protecting their families and their values and their freedoms. So if it is called upon, the American veterans will rise up and secure their towns and their counties. It's not about America as a macro continent. It's about the counties and the states, the individual republics of America, Texas, Idaho, South Dakota, North Dakota, Florida, the independent states are independent republics. That's how they were set up in the founding fathers. We've forgotten that and lost that and been brainwashed to think that every state is a slave to Washington, D.C., but it's not. And this may be the scenario where we reorient ourselves back to our original condition. So I think that lays out what the possible scenarios are. And I hope and pray that we have a smooth election, and then Donald Trump is a Renaissance man and a reformer, and he doesn't make the mistakes he made before. But time will tell. And I'll end it there and hand it back to you.
So, you were talking about Trump. I mean, I'm looking at a few different videos on that, and one of them was a woman that was behind him, and basically she holds up a sign, so it looks like she's giving the signal to shoot, and then everyone is ducking, and she's out with her camera. So that's one thing. There's another one I just seen today, and there was some. Is it like 5 to 15 million? They were shorting the Truth Social by the 15th. So surely you can trace that back to who's doing that, and they should be arrested, because that's 100% that was organized. They assumed he would be dead to do something like that.
Yes, I think you're right on that. That is traceable. That is evidence. That is a breadcrumb trail. I've seen that video of that woman too, looking to the side and then holding up her phone. And I agreed. I thought that's odd. I mean, you always have the potential of these stupid people doing crazy, stupid things. Or was she a plant? Was she a trigger? I don't know yet. I thought it was very real, the whole scenario of him being shot. I thought, when you're shot, you go into adrenalized mode. You go into shock and trauma. You don't just stand up like, hey, I'm okay. I mean, it's an event, and there's a lot more blood. So, I don't know, but all of the material I know so far and the people I've been working with in the last 4 days, we're all seemingly inclining towards this. Looks like it happened. It looks like it was real, but it looks like government Secret Service was involved. It looks like another Kennedy assassination. Jim Fetzer has done a lot of work on the Kennedy shootings, talked about Secret Service. There are parts of the Zapruder film that were never seen, that were altered. And it includes and you may know this already, the limousine stopping and Kennedy being hit by 3 different bullets. So the Secret Service, I think, were complicit in this assassination of Trump possibility. And
just on that, because you've probably seen this as well, there was somebody telling the police officers that there was somebody on the roof. Yes. But the other thing, which was like, it looked like there was actors for the Secret Service, because one of them had their gun, and I mean, like, she couldn't even holster her gun, like, and they were looking like, as I looked at them, I said, they're not Secret Service, because when they're Secret Service. And I mean, you, with your experience, would be looking at this going, these are actors. Yeah. This is not proper people. So how was that allowed? Does he not have any control over that? Or is it that, hey, we're providing protection for you and you just do your thing and we've got your back in the background? But the reality is, obviously, they didn't.
Well, I said in my original post when this just happened, I said either Trump is playing a part and he's part of this false flag deception. He's part of a psychological operation to manipulate people and their voting in his direction. He's either part of it. He's an actor, he's a liar, and the whole thing is fraudulent. And he slapped his ear with a blood bag to make it look like he was hit. These people around him, these women, 3 women. I've never seen 3 women in the Secret Service by a SUV. it's always pretty big burly men, and they're serious. These people look like the beta male team, the junior varsity team. I said it was either false, it's always a possibility, or it is real. But in being real, it also has elements of a conspiracy and actors and false people that, like Kennedy, were preparing and participating in a conspiracy to kill Trump. Now, I also said this: if you move forward, the only thing that matters is speak the raw, direct truth. Okay, Secret Service is a domestic enemy. You have no power to protect the president. You have shown that you're a domestic enemy. You are cut off entirely from Trump's security team. He will have military veterans, Delta Force, Rangers, SEALs, Marine Recon. Those are the best guys you could ever have anyway. You have a team of 1,000 military guys who behave militarily. There's a totally different animal in a military person compared to a cop or Secret Service or a marshal. A lot of them want to be military, but they never have been. When you go through special forces, you go through these advanced training, you are the best of the best. The best special operations guys are the smartest and the strongest, and they are the most alert with the highest IQs. That's who Trump needs around him. And if he doesn't, he's suspect. Either he's an idiot, or he's playing a role, or he's just an idiot because he's putting himself under the yoke of his own enemies. And really, that's a betrayal of the Constitution. You have sworn an oath to uphold the Constitution against domestic enemies. So the Secret Service, I say, is a domestic enemy. I've said the FBI is a domestic enemy because they hid the Hunter Biden laptop story and contributed with Facebook and YouTube and Twitter to keep all of this from the American people, delete tweets and delete Facebook accounts that were drawing attention to this. They delete your channel, no doubt. Back then, the FBI, the Biden administration, working with big tech. So we are infiltrated by a lot of domestic enemies. The question is, if this was real, what is going to flow from it? Again, I think that if it was real, there were two-man shooting teams, and I think it was a 22 Magnum round that shot Trump, because that is the hole in the ear. That looks like a 22 Magnum round. I've had a 22 Magnum rifle, bolt action Marlin, with a scope, and it fires for miles. So that's my suspicion. But I don't know. I don't know if it's real or if it's fake. We're still going to have to let all that fall together.
And I mean, if we look at Israel, and he's kind of totally in favor of Israel, which is strange because anyone that comes out against Israel, everyone attacks him. But for some reason, everyone's kind of ignoring that Trump is for Israel. And the other thing is, I mean, I've mentioned it previously on other shows, but like if we look at like Canada, Trudeau was fantastic for a while, and everybody was like voting for him, and then all of a sudden he's told to be the bad boy. And I'm convinced it's the same with this, because like at one moment, if you look at the poison dart and the lockdown, he's saying, oh, take a natural thing. And then he's going on shows saying, get jabbed. I've been jabbed. And his daughter's doing a photo shoot. So like, if you're one of the good boys, you don't play that card. So for me, unfortunately, we all want to live in hope. But I think, as we know, hope isn't a strategy, and I think it's within ourselves to actually make change. And like, even if we go back to like what you said at the start with the EU, because I've seen it, like I'm living in Poland, but I'm actually Irish, and I've seen a lot of Irish stepping up about this as well. You're probably saying, hey, he doesn't have a Polish accent.
I do. I said, I'm from Scotland. I know that accent. He's not quite a Polsman. He's an Irishman. Who I like the Irish. I was born in Edinburgh.
And lovely. And I've seen Irish people doing the exact same thing. They're standing up, they're ripping Ursula apart, or they're saying exactly as it is. And I've even heard that the Irish guy, Micheál Martin, who was a previous leader, has been earmarked for that position. But like, we see this for years where they're all kind of coming out, they're attacking him, but there's nothing happening. And I'm just curious, like with your experience, like, because with the elections, the European elections that happen, is there enough of a shift that has happened that we can make change and kick out all these people that are, destroying Europe?
You know, I think it is coming down to people abandoning these institutions and leaving them and creating their own ones, their new tribes, their new lands. I've said for a long time, I could sense the peoples of Europe leaving parts of France or Britain, Manchester, Germany, that have been infiltrated with these African migrants that, dumb as a bag of rocks and rape anything that moves. Why would you stay in an area like that and fight to reclaim it? It's like one person against 1,000, rather than moving to a safer place where you can create numbers, you can create fortresses. It's almost like El Cid in Spain, and it sounds very weird or dark, but this is human sociological evolution. When women and children and families and young people are surrounded by a menace that is mentally retarded and rabid and doesn't have language or customs and has a religious animosity, that is not Islamic, I might add. It doesn't exist in the Iranian Shia culture, but some of the madrasas and the Wahhabi mentality perverts that and corrupts that. I think a lot of Europeans are going to be seeking an exodus and relocating. And I think it's because of the conflict that's brewing. Otherwise, there seems to be a rising, desire to overthrow Ursula von der Leyen, overthrow Rishi Sunak, overthrow Schultz, overthrow Macron. That seems to be, bubbling up. Is it real? I would hope so. But again, Europe has been traumatized for 10 years. All of this starting under Merkel and the globalists and breaking apart Libya and flooding them. This is something that can't be reversed. It just has to be realigned. People in Europe have to relocate and reorganize, and they may need to for the certain areas of the industrial might that sadly has been deconstructed. They're going to have to go in with a sort of a warrior martial law mentality. And oddly as it sounds, I think Russia is going to be the country that people flee to, and maybe not flee physically, but embrace morally and traditional values wise and ideologically, because Russia is I've been there 3 times, and I've seen a conservative Christian people. I've seen Irish people living over there, Americans living over there. Every person of a European American descent who lives in Russia is happy as a pig on a farm. They love it because it's safe, it's clean, it's like America and Europe was in the 1950s or 60s when it had rebuilt itself. There was no garbage. It's traditional family values, marriage between a man and a woman. There's no tent cities. There's no immigrants living on the streets. There's no violence. It's an ideal world, and they have their problems too, of course. But as a Westerner looking into Russia, I'm going, wow, this is a very clean, beautiful, safe place, and I think that is going to be very attractive to European and American people who are sensing that they have nothing but civil war and violence and disruption around them. So we'll see. And I do think as Russia has won Asia, China, these other countries to their side, the Middle East countries to their side, I think they'll also win increasing numbers of Europeans and Americans to their side. And America already is not a country that has hostility towards Russia. That has been a top-down imposed, false political agenda. And I think that's going to eventually decapitate these globalists, like in the Republican and the Democrat ranks in Washington, D.C.
Because I know you have to go. We have to, but this is something, especially with your background, because a lot of people with all these asylum seekers coming in, they're all saying they're all military age. But then I'm hearing stuff like they're emptying the prisons and they're emptying the asylums to let them in. And when you look, because like as you mentioned, most military men, like they really kind of look after their family and everything. Like they kind of go to the different land, but they're not the type that would do that kind of thing. So it doesn't sound to me like it's military men. It looks like they've emptied their prisons. And in Ireland, I don't know, are you aware? Ireland is destroyed, but the news isn't showing it. They're building all these places for them, and the police now are battering the locals, and they're ignoring councillors and everything. So like there's big, it's in Dublin, it's in Tipperary, and there's more people going to be put into some towns. And when the people are protesting, they're battering them. So like, and I know that's going on in the world, but I'm just curious, do you think that they're actually emptying the prison and they're the crap that's coming across?
Yes. I agree with that entirely. I mean, that is a typical military move. You send in your rabid, crazed guard dogs, you know, frothing at the mouth that just want to kill and rob and tear, and send them in first, and then let them be killed, and then you go in and conquer and repopulate. It's the fall of Rome, but a controlled fall of Rome. Now, people underestimate the white Anglo-Saxon, Celtic, Scottish, Irish, German, Scandinavian-blooded people. We are a ferocious fighting people that when we get our blood boiled and our back up, there's no one more deadly and dangerous that'll fight to the death with club, with claw, with tooth, with gun, with knife. There's poems written about it that I think is coming. And if the police and these vaccinated fools that I think really now have a mental delusion from the COVID-19 vaccine, if the police or the politicians think that they can do this to the civilians, you're really stirring up a guerrilla army, a guerrilla, an invisible force that will be coming up and overthrowing these police or politicians. And for that reason, we'll see if people move out of these immigrant-infested zones, or if they just go to war and say, no, we're not tolerating this. If you're on their side, you're on the side of the domestic enemies and the invaders of Ireland. And if you're on the side of the invader of Ireland and I'm an Irishman, you're dead. You're an enemy just as much as these Africans that are bringing over in rubber rafts. And I'm not going to allow my family or my parents to be displaced and my child's school to be turned into a rape colony building. I'm going to burn everything and kill everything and die fighting if I have to for my children's sake. That's where the globalists don't understand, because they don't have families. They don't have care. They don't have any investment. They just think that they can get away playing the world like a chess game. No, you're getting into the spiritual, heated, bloodbath potentiality of arousing and awakening the sleeping giant. And I've always said a Celtic, Scandinavian, Nordic alliance, and I would say Slavic. If you have Slavic, Russian, Finland, Sweden, Norway, Scotland, Ireland, German, if you have that alliance that says, if you stand for values, if you stand for tradition, if you stand for marriage and children, if you stand for peace, if you stand for Europe being Europe and for Europeans, not for Islamic, Muslim, or African people, but for the people who have lived here for 3,000 years, if longer, since Noah's Ark, then we all need to be allied in creating this crescent, this Scandinavian, Celtic, Germanic, Slavic crescent or archipelago. That's how it could reorient itself. And remember, this is how history takes its twists and turns. We don't know everything about history either. So I could see, this scenario, because the bottom line is the Irish, the Celtic, the Scandinavian, they know how to fight, and they're cold weather fighters. And that makes them very lethal. And I think they've been pushed and abused so far and betrayed so far by their own people. There's about to be a great paradigm shift, and we're on the precipice of it.
Yeah. Perfect.
And it's happening now. So it's not like the whole world is just slowly waking up and taking their sovereignty back. Scott, thank you so much for this empowering prelude. So that's Lt.Scott Bennett. So why don't you invite again, and so that for the audio people, then they could hear where to get in touch with you, and I will also just reach out to you for the next time.
Absolutely. Well, they can go to our website, destroy-cancer.com. That's where we have our nutrient elements for anti-cancer, and we have all of our links to our other shows and such. But go to www.destroy-cancer.com. It's got our links. And I had a skin cancer, and I used this substance, Indian black salve. It destroyed the cancer, got rid of it. So we put it up there for anyone who has natural remedies or cancer. This is the best thing to get. You see pictures of what it does, and my contact information's up there. So I appreciate being with you guys, and happy to do it again anytime.
Thank
you
you
very much.
And let me also share that if, in addition to Scott's, how do you call it, resources, if you're looking for the quantum resonance supplements, contact me by email. No phone calls. There's a lot of junk phone calls. And then we could tailor the health need for your health needs. Okay. And if you're so stressed with everything that's happening, but it's the best time to be alive, Scott, I feel so alive with everything
Yep.
that's happening.
Absolutely.
And if you need help through the scalar frequencies remote session, please be free to contact me. graceasagra@ymail.com. And thank you, everyone. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and just keep sharing this video, okay? And be well. As Scott said, you got to start it from yourself, okay? We all have our warrior, innate ability. We just have to tap
Amen.
it. Thank you
Amen.
very much.
Let God arise and his enemies be scattered.
Wonderful.
So I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. As mentioned at the start, you'll find my 6 podcasts on bio.link/podcaster. And also, if you'd like to start a podcast or do a podcasting tour, you'll find the information on that or on the QR code that's there. Be sure to give us a thumbs up, 5-star rating, and share with your friends because it really helps. And also, I'd like to thank DanielPackard.com, helping people with fear, doubt, and anxiety. He's got a 90% success rate, and he's only charging if he helps you. So be sure to check him out, and you get a free call to discuss everything. Until next week, take care.